months of hell. What's up, you guys? Over the past year and a half, I have been restoring this 1972 Boler, and she is finally complete. In this video, I want to go over the things that I did that I like and the things that I wish that I would have done differently or that I would do differently in the future. This will not be a tour video, so if you want an actual tour of the Boler, check out the link in the description for that video. Let's begin. So I think the reason this is such a good time to make this video is because the Boler is empty. I'm just about to load her up to go on a camping trip, and most of these restorations have happened about a year ago. So she's been on a lot of road trips. We've gone on many camping trips and traveled over thousands of kilometers at this point. So we can see what the wear and tear is like after 1 year of use. Starting off with the exterior, when I picked up this Boler, you guys, it was worse in person than what I saw online, and it was very intimidating. Aside from the horrifying paint sanding situation, it also had a lot going on this side. So I removed all of the vents and grates and things and did my own patch job. The things I like about this patch job is, first of all, I like that I did it. Even though it's a little bit ugly, I think that it's better than if I was to leave all those grates in there. I do like the method I used. Check out this video for that adventure. But what I wish I did differently was care a little bit more about the overall bumps. I would have added more body filler and sanded it out to be a little bit more smooth. Another thing I did with this Boler was have some panels replaced because there was a couple cracks. Now they are fully watertight, and for that reason, I am really happy. I've never had any leaks, but I don't like the way that they are aging. Now keep in mind, these are 50-something-year-old windows, but I made them look way older. The caulking I used has not aged well in the sun, and it also has collected a lot of whatever that is. So that looks pretty bad in my opinion. I guess I wouldn't have known which caulking would not do this, but I would just be more clean. Maybe I would have put some tape down to not let it spill out so much, or at least be like a clean line of that. But one thing I'm happy with is that I used some caulking to secure this because they would be able to be pulled out before. And I'm happy with this. It doesn't move like it used to rolling down the highway. Sometimes I would find it sticking out like this much on this side. So that's something I'm happy with. Another thing I'm very happy with is these windows. I did something I've not seen online at all. I fully replaced these windows and bought a new seal online from, I think, the Boler website, but I wanted to make sure that it was going to be watertight, and the best way to do that was to completely cover it in Sikaflex Marine. I mean, that's the best way I could think of, and I'm really happy I did that. So what I did was I used a little dental syringe and I squeezed it under here because there was quite a bit of gapping. I squeezed it to fill all the little holes and in here, and then I just fully covered it. I put some on a paper plate and then used a paintbrush and just covered it all. Oh yeah, and I taped it off to make sure it was nice and clean. So I'm really happy with that, and I have no regrets. I wouldn't do anything differently. And as far as the exterior goes, the only other thing that I would like to address is the sanding and the painting. You guys, this was what felt like months of hell. So first of all, the previous owner had tried sanding it, and they sanded all the way into the gel coat, which is the layer over top of the fiberglass when they are making it in the factory. So it goes fiberglass, gel coat, and then the primer and paint. They sanded into the gel coat, which caused a lot of denting. And I did the best thing that I could think to do, which was just continue committing to it. So I sanded into the gel coat all over the place on this thing with the intention of having a clean slate. Would I do that differently? Yes and no. Ultimately, I would still sand into the gel coat considering I was put in a position where it was already sanded into. If you are going to be restoring a Boler and you haven't sanded into the gel coat, this is a huge PSA. Do not sand into the gel coat. You're going to be asking for drama in ways that you do not want. So if that's the case, just go really light on the sanding. Just make sure that it is smooth. but you don't have to go any deeper than that. Okay, don't go deeper than that. But because that's the position I was in, that's what I ended up doing. And I did a pretty job, honestly. Let me show you what I mean. You can really see it right here. The texture of the Boler. It is brutal. So this was happening because I was using the sanding disc on a slight angle because that was far more effective than if I was to hold it flat. And even on that angle, getting this crappy result took me days and days. So if I was to have held it flat, it would have taken forever. But most likely you're not going to have to go all the way down to the gel coat like I did. And so I would say definitely hold your sander flat, okay? Another thing that I wish I did differently was installing a rock guard here. There are quite a few different shapes that you'll see on Bolers, but what I find, well, you can see here easily, there's really only 2 spots you need it, which is where the tires are flicking rocks. I mean, the rocks literally take chunks out of the Boler. So I really think that should be a high priority if you're restoring a Boler. Oh, before we go inside, there's one more exterior thing that I'm really happy I did, which is adding this rain guard, and I sealed it really well on the inside. And the reason for that is the top of the door is actually more in this way than the bottom of the door. So rain gets in the Boler, but now it doesn't because I installed that thing. Okay, moving inside. The first thing I want to address is this floor. I used the yacht foam flooring, and generally speaking, I quite like it. I just want to point out that it does stain, and I have scrubbed this and it's not coming out. So that's a bit of an issue, but I think it's really good flooring. I think it's worth putting in your Boler. They do have darker colors. Maybe it would be a good idea to go for a darker color. One thing I did that I would recommend though, is if you do install this flooring, you see how it has black seams? One sheet will not cover the whole floor of the Boler. You will inevitably have a seam to have to seal, and the black marine grade Sikaflex, once again, pulls through. So I would go pretty heavy-handed on all of the edges, and there's a lot of forgiveness because the sealant is black and the seams are black, and I know this thing is fully waterproof. But I do have major floor regrets, just not on this floor. This floor. So I thought I was being clever when I installed this floor, thinking that it was just going to be a really durable surface to slide crates on, but I chose the wrong material. And if you know anything about construction, and if you watched my channel previously, you probably saw me using that, and you probably knew, but I had to learn the lesson the hard way. So this material is a pressed board that then has like some type of coating on it. So absolutely don't use what I used because it is peeling up. It's kind of like cardboard, I guess, on the inside. And I don't even know what I'm gonna do now to mitigate this. Maybe I will put some peel and stick tiles on top. I'm not sure. Okay, moving into the kitchen. I just want to touch on the things that I think are really useful for you guys. And this countertop situation is definitely something to consider. So I put in a gorgeous butcher block countertop that I made myself. Very proud of myself. However, I installed a sink thinking I would be installing a faucet, and I don't think that a sink or a faucet is necessary inside of a Boler for most people. I would usher you to reconsider whether you are interested in doing that. So I'm happy with this. I use the sink as a storage place. I keep my window coverings in it and little lights and a couple other things. For that reason, I'm happy to have the storage here, because if I was just to use the storage down below, I wouldn't be able to store things in the area the sink is anyway, so it would have been dead space. So ultimately, I'm happy about the sink. Might even be a move installing a sink with the intention of using it as storage, or making a storage box that's accessible from the top, so that way you have use of this space. But I don't want it to be a functional sink, so yeah, keep that in mind. But I did already start to install the plumbing, and now this is just like a big thing that's in the way that I can remove and will remove someday. But for now, I'm really happy with it. And it was an unexpected turn of events to just install the sink and then decide that that's perfect. But honestly, my pro tip to you is install some kind of storage and leave the sink and the faucet out of it. I am very partial to cooking outdoors in this Boler. What I do is I have this awesome vintage camp kitchen that I got at a garage sale, but there are modern versions of it, and it has numerous countertops and then a sink out there. And then I'll just use that sink to wash my dishes, do whatever it is that I need to do. Here are some comparable links nowadays to that, and that solves all of my problems. I don't have to worry about any kind of fumes inside or like food smell or splatter, and I have more space to move around in that outdoor camp kitchen. And it is out of the rain because I have this covery thingy that suctions onto the Boler and then has, I'll just show you what it looks like. So I love that. I think that it's the right answer for me. The only time I would think that that would be annoying is in really bad weather. But in that case, that leads me to another thing I did in here that I'm really happy that I did, which is install this outlet right here. And I love that outlet location because if I did want to cook inside, I can bring in an induction cooktop, just roll with one burner and get whatever it is that I need done inside, say it was stormy or whatever. But how would you run the induction cooktop, Ellie? Great question. Another thing I think I did really well, and this is just by luck because I was actually gifted this power bank, is made this Boler all electric. So welcome to my electrical closet. In here I have my Anchor power bank and I'm pretty happy with it. It does the trick. I do have to be very careful about my power usage, but I can still do everything that I want to do as long as I am careful. So I can keep the fridge running constantly and charge my phone and use the lights and use my diesel heater as long as I'm careful. The only thing is I have to subsidize it with solar if I'm using it to its full capacity, like what I just described. So fortunately, I do have a solar setup. And so I have a couple panels and I have not installed them on the roof. I chose to keep them detached. And the reason for that is so that I can move them around and point them in the direction of the sun as the day passes so I can get the absolute most out of those panels. And then with that, I am super comfortable to do whatever it is that I want. On a gray, rainy, miserable day, I won't be able to pull in any solar. So in that case, what I would do is just be a little bit more tinsy with my energy use. And honestly, I've had no problems. I don't know if I would recommend this exact model though. In the future, I would probably choose to get at least one up in size, but I think it's great. And it was a gift, so I'm so not complaining. But if you were to do this, I would go for one up. Okay, so in here you can see that I have this power box and this converts DC into AC, and I did this all myself and I hardly even know about these things, and it was actually surprisingly easy and everything seems to be working well. But I'm not going to give you any electrical advice just because it's so not my area of expertise. What I will say though is I do have a regret. I shouldn't have had to have used this box. So the reason I have this box is because I have a Chinese diesel heater, which I think I like, and it lives down here and it runs on diesel, but it also needs to be powered with electricity so that the pump works and the fan and just all the general mechanisms. Now, the diesel heater. We should talk about the diesel heater. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? They have a cult following and I half understand why. They're extremely good on diesel. I've ran this for hours and hours and I've not noticed the diesel decrease at all in my tank right there. But the downfalls are it is super loud. I'll speak for myself, but I think it's very annoying to install. It's pretty cumbersome. Sure, there's this red unit, but then there's all of the wiring and the fuel line and the hose thing and all of that. It's huge. So I would like a better solution in the future that is more compact. I would potentially consider using one of those propane heaters. I understand you shouldn't use propane heaters indoors on paper, but I would at least personally look into options for that. Or if you guys have any suggestions. My point is this takes up a lot of space. It was challenging to install and it is very loud. So why is this connected to this power box. Well, it is originally wired to be run off of DC, like one of those car outlets. And I made sure to check the specs on my Anker power bank, and it was totally okay. The diesel heater would draw well within the capacity of the power bank. But the thing about the diesel heater is it has a glow plug that needs to heat up, and I think that takes approximately 20 seconds. And in that time, it pulls way more power than its draw for the rest of its use. So in that time, it pulls more than this power bank is able to give. So I had to figure out how to work around that, and I had to make it be the type that plugs into the wall rather than plugs into the car outlet. You can tell how much I know about electricity based off of the way that I'm describing this. But it did work. I used a great YouTube episode. I found this guy on YouTube that made a super thorough video. I will leave that down below. And I just followed what he did, even though I don't know anything about this stuff, and it works great. So I have regrets, but I don't know what the best solution is. So staying in the bedroom, I do have another thing that I really love that I did, but also something I would change. So I made these window coverings. They're magnetic. I like this because they're not bulky, and I won't have, you know, like curtains flopping around my face while I'm laying in bed if I don't want them on. And if I do want them on, they're very tight to the window. So I think it's really clean. Problem is that I'm having a hard time finding an adhesive that actually adheres to these windows. So I have a magnet here that's stayed, and a magnet here that's stayed, and a magnet here that stayed just by chance. But I think that because it gets so cold and hot and cold and hot, whatever adhesive I'm using, it just keeps on failing and these magnets keep falling off. So what I ended up doing on this side, just because I really needed some privacy, is I used some Gorilla Tape, and it's hideous. So ultimately, I would say make sure that you are using a glue that will adhere. And I'm not sure what that glue would be. So again, sorry, I have problems but no solutions. But watch out for these problems. I will say it is not Gorilla Glue. It is not super glue. It is not two-part epoxy, and it is not the contact glue. You know, the kind you put on one side and the other side and you let it dry and then you put it together. I thought that that one was going to be the winner, but it is not that one either. So save yourself the effort and don't try those ones. So then looking up, this roof vent is awesome. I love it so much. You'll notice that it has this fan hanging on it, but this is just a separate accessory. I love this because it brings in so much more light. The previous roof vent was several inches smaller and was also leaking. So replacing this was super important as far as the leaking goes, but also it's just great. It just feels cleaner in here and I love it. So one thing that I did was I chose not to get the kind with the fan. This is personal preference, you guys. You can choose that. There's nothing wrong with those. It's just that I would have had to have wired in, and I didn't want to cut the elephant skin open, which you could totally do if you wanted. And the other thing is I have this, and this has a little strap on it, and it hangs here, and it's a dual function. So it has a light, and a remote too, which is nice. Also has a fan, and so it sits on that nicely, and it can push or pull air, and it's so nice. It's nice to have a fan going on a hot summer day. I could probably smack my head into it, but I've never done that before. And it's also lovely to have the ability to have a light at night. So this is a score. I will leave a link to this thing down below. The last thing I want to say about this roof vent is I wouldn't install the trim that comes with it the way that it is, because the trim wants to sit in this little hole here and then it sticks out this much. So what I did instead is I dremeled off the whole part of it that inserts in here, and I just kept this side because it's pretty, and then I adhered it and used some caulking to clean up the edges and then just painted over it, and it takes up a lot less headroom, and I think it looks really nice. So there's a pro tip. I want this video to be actually helpful for you and not full of fluff, so I can think of 2 other tips that I didn't see online. One of them is really stupid. Okay, you probably wouldn't even try this, but I did. And then the other one is 10 out of 10 genius. Pat myself on the back. So clever. So the second last tip is when it comes to lighting, do not install glass. What? You don't install glass in a camper that's going to be bouncing around? No, do not install glass. I had these adorable light covers on here that were made out of glass, hand-blown glass, and I thought, of course that's risky, but I was going to be really smart and make custom little helmets for these things and make sure that they were secured in transport and that I can get away with having something bougie on the back roads, but that was not the case. Not surprising. It did, however, take about 8 trips for it to break, but it did break pretty brutally, so you guys don't think that you can get away with installing glass in a camper. But now that it's just this light, it actually is totally fine. This is just the same exact light fixture that was hanging here, except I used a hammer and broke off the glass. But this works totally fine now. It's not the cutest, but it's still kind of cute. I'm happy with it. But the last tip is in relation to the elephant skin. And elephant skin is such a interesting fiber. If you have a Boler, you know that it is the best part of the Boler, but also the worst part of the Boler. It's great for insulation, but it is a total pain to repair if you need to repair it. So I had quite a few areas that did require repair, and I figured out that if you take some of the extra elephant skin that's on the wall underneath the counter, peel that off the wall. You don't really need it. Sure, you're losing a little bit of insulation, but it's for a greater cause. Take that, maybe about this big, and do whatever repair you need to do. So here's a good example of what I mean. This whole seam was actually a huge space between the elephant skin, and it went all the way to the fiberglass. And sure, it's still obviously a seam, but I could have used more product, but the trick is to put your caulking in between the seam. I used Big Stretch for this and it worked really well. And then use your piece of elephant skin. I got it wet with soapy water, and then you push that on to replicate the texture of the elephant skin, and it looks great. Let me show you some areas I did this. Oh yeah, this, by the way, isn't elephant skin. This was a huge area that was ripped out. This is all caulking, and of course it's not perfect, but it is so much better. And all along here too, this is where I used more caulking, and it worked so well. In the very beginning, we decided to lift the Boler off of its frame and revamp the frame, and the torsion axles needed to be replaced. So what we ended up doing was replacing them with leaf springs. I would highly recommend, personally. Not gonna lie, this step I was not involved. I just handed the Boler over to somebody who knew what they were doing and let him replace these axles. But what I can say is the Boler does have quite a bit of bounce for the back roads, which I think is good because bounce equals cushioning. But as long as everything is secured well, I think that it was worth it, because this also gave my Boler a lift, and ultimately I think it's more functional and I like it aesthetically. So I would consider not going with the torsion axle if you were to replace it and switching it up. And then actually the last thing I will say is keeping in mind that everything is bumping around on the back roads. One thing I did, not even grasping how important this was, is I used Loctite on everything I possibly could except for this one door. And that is because I installed this door many months later and just forgot to. And then after one trip, one of the bolts fell out. So it doesn't take much. The hardware can rattle out really easily in these campers, so just be on top of securing all of your nuts and bolts. I'm just gonna say that now before you get started, and I'm gonna save you a lot of headache in the future. So whether you're watching this video just to hang out with me for entertainment, or if you are actually going to be restoring a Boler, I hope you learned something. And feel free to comment any kind of questions you might have or any tips you might have, because I have another camper restoration coming up after this. I'm not going to spoil what kind of camper I bought, but I'm going to start that series when I can really start it and commit to it, which is going to be next spring. I won't be able to work on the camper all winter because winter is winter and you don't want to work in a camper in the winter when it's not restored. So hang tight for spring. And in the meantime, I'm still going to keep making videos and bring you guys along on my adventures. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.